attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Derek Krebs. I'll be leading today's Prospero webinar, so welcome one and all. We're at the top of the hour. We usually have a couple of people that will straggle in, so I'll just do some nice little introductory remarks, but the focus of today's show is going to be on the product Prospero to improve your budgeting and reporting, what I call bring the easy button. So let me start by just a couple of introductions to myself and the product, and then I'll spend maybe about 5 or so minutes in PowerPoint introducing today's topic. And then additionally, we're going to have some nice takeaways, meaning we're going to record this. We'll send all of you a nice little thank you email, and we're going to have some nice little takeaways as well. So to again say hello, my name is Derek Krebs. I'm senior consultant with the MSX Group, and I've been doing this for about 30 plus years. So it's been a very fun ride. About 15 of the first years, I and most of our founding members, we worked at FRX Software and got acquired by Microsoft. So we worked internally at Microsoft for about 15 years. We helped deliver to thousands of users those flagship products, like on the one side, FRX, then later branded Manager Porter, was on the reporting side. And then secondly, there's an awesome budgeting tool called Microsoft Forecaster on the budgeting side. Historically, it used to be two separate applications, but now 15 years ago, we got spun off, and I'm so glad we did. We're now a private company, which means, hey, we have new product features, development, and better service to our whole slew of customers. So welcome one and all. And instead of two separate programs and processes, what I call double your work, it is now one cohesive tool named Prospero. So I'll shed a little light. And usually in our audience today, as I'm looking at the list of people, everybody is currently on mute. So take advantage of the question area, the go-to meaning webinar area. In our last few minutes, we'll be fielding that. And our audience members, we usually have a mixed bag, usually of three different audience types. One is existing Prospero users that might want to learn a little bit more about the product, or maybe new staff they have. Or second of three audience members, we might have some staff we've worked with over the years on those Microsoft products that are looking to transition and migrate to Prospero. And third and finally, we have oftentimes partners that are looking to sell and deploy that. So again, welcome one and all. Now, as I'm about ready to move off of this slide, one thing I want to emphasize is obviously our years work with those Microsoft products. And what we did is we took the best features and ease of use in those applications and we brought those into Prospero. And secondly, that first bullet point I wanted to emphasize, which I'll do a couple of times on today's phone call, is one of many differentiators of Prospero and the MSX group is the report conversion. So we can take all your hard work of all those FRX and or Manager Portal reports, and we can migrate them seamlessly into Prospero. Or anybody using the Microsoft Forecaster product, we can do a data migration and we can bring that budget balances into there, Prospero, and that's going to save you tons of time and effort and huge cost savings. So huge differentiator I want to be sure to emphasize. All right, since we have about half of our audience members that are new and blue to Prospero, let me just introduce that a little bit further, which is it's a budgeting and reporting tool. Primarily, we're going to be grabbing your general ledger data, but what's great about Prospero is it also has a data warehouse, which can include non-general ledger data, and possibilities are endless. It could be units sold, head count, rates, like units sold, price, amounts, etc., inside this data warehouse. And it's really going to do all the reporting, budgeting, and forecasting to make that a cohesive process for you. Along with tons of new features, I'll be shedding light on about 10 or 15 in today's short 1 hour phone calls, but a couple are the interactive charts and graphs we've now included inside Prospero, the awesome drill down to account and transaction level, including what we call changing the drill order. And I personally work with about 4 other competing products these last 30 years, and I love Prospero for its ease of use, easy to deploy, just only a couple days. You have a little quick start, you can be up and running. And in other words, we're not an Excel add-in. We use the user-friendly rows, columns, and trees. And here is just one slide on the reporting. I've touched upon most of those, so I'll just sort of gloss this over. Mainly for the recording, I'll leave this up for just a second. And I just wanted to reiterate the charts and graphs, the awesome drill down, and that data warehouse, including non-general ledger data, budgets, statistics, you name it. And of course, here is for those people that are maybe unfamiliar with the nice historical Microsoft products using the rows, columns, and trees, we've brought that inside Prospero as well. We have three simple building blocks. We have one, a row, like you see there in the left in blue, like an income statement row or line set I can use for 10 different reports because secondly of the third building blocks. Secondly, there in red, we might have a column definition. And third and finally, we leverage reporting trees. So really we can mix and match all those building blocks versus Excel competition of ours, which we're not an Excel add-in. It's very painful to create edit reports that have shared looks and feels. So that is what I love and our customers do about the interchangeable rows, columns, and trees. And then just a note or two on the budgeting side, then we're going to jump inside the application. Yep, instead of Excel pains or hell, oftentimes it's been coined. Prospero has awesome budgeting slash forecasting abilities, and it has a spreadsheet look and feel, but it's a spreadsheet in steroids because it leverages those reusable row, column, and tree. It has one SQL database behind the scenes, and it has the trees to do the automatic consolidations across multiple company, currency, location departments as needed across your organization. And then also within Prospero's budgeting, we have all the extra awesome bells and whistles that you might want in a budgeting tool, including human resources detail budgeting, revenue and cost of goods sold budgeting, line item details, audit trail history, instant consolidations, just to name a few that I'll cover with you today. And then here's just one slide I'll just mention and haunt you with the spreadsheet pains there are out there, but I probably won't quote those to save time. And last but not least, lo and behold, ta-da, there's where Prospero brings the easy button. And this, of course, talks about the budgeting side, but I'll also emphasize the reporting. And last but not least, primarily for the recording and also this PowerPoint we'll be sure to share with everybody who attended or registered today. We'll send a nice little thank you along with this PowerPoint, along with the recording, as I see a few people that join the call after the top of the hour. And again, my name is Derek Krebs, and I'll pull up my email that I'll send to you afterwards. All right, and just highlighted are a couple of the differentiators of Prospero and the MSX group, mainly for the recording I've already quoted in today's phone call. And also, I'll just call to your attention and invite you to our free trial version, which also stands ourselves apart from the rest. So, sort of like buying a new or used car. Yep, you always want to test drive it. So, we take the extra free, no risk opportunity to provide that to you and convert your reports you might have just to show its power and ease of use. So, for those considering, a personal invite. And last but not least, as I wrap up the PowerPoint for today, what we did is we reflected on our 30 plus years working with customers. The column to the left is current challenges you might be facing in your reporting and budgeting world, and to the right, the Prospero solutions. And I'll just maybe summarize one or two of these, like item number one. Yeah, some of you might still be using the Microsoft stack, which hasn't been service packed nor no new features from Microsoft over 15 plus years. We still support hundreds of customers on those products today. So we're always going to have your back on that regard. But Prospero there to the right, ongoing development, tons of new features, service packs rolled out continually. And how about the item number two? Security was very poor and decentralized, especially I'll relate it to Manager Porter, where you had to secure only within 4 rigid roles within Microsoft Manager Porter. Also was very decentralized and bad Manager Porter, meaning you had to secure all these individual trees. You had to secure all these individual report folders and files. But in Prospero, we've centralized and made that super easy and centralized. And I'll, if time permits, talk about a few of those regards. Item number 4, my quick summary, is budgeting reporting used to be historically 2 separate duplicate work and processes, but now Prospero one cohesive one. And item number 5 is a huge win of a new feature Prospero's had for many, many years. That is what we call using summary accounts and expanding those, which means if you add a new revenue expense account or balance sheet account, it was very painful in the Microsoft era. You had to go to all your different reports, line sets, rows. You secondly had to go to the budgeting tool to update those manually and many. But inside Prospero, we leverage one single summary account, like total expenses. I'm going to show you a little bit later. It might be a range of my accounts like 5,000 through 9,999, and then we can automatically expand that. And if new accounts get added, our automatic integration to your general ledger will grab those. We interface with about 40 different ERP accounting package systems, and we're adding new ones all the time in case there's one on a rare case we don't have. And how about finally, this is slide 1 of 2 of pain points, like the column to the left, your challenges, or solutions to the right. I'll mention item number 6 briefly. This even goes back to the FRX era. There used to be about 4 or 5 outputs, meaning directly to Excel or to the printer, etc., or to the viewer. But when we went to from FRX to Manager Porter about 20 plus years ago, Microsoft yanked those away. Customers and our consultants screamed. We're like, why'd you do that? Don't take features away. And we brought those back, those outputs. So I'm going to show you 4 or 5 outputs, like to the viewer, or what we call the workspace is the most powerful and dynamic and secure. But definitely we brought back some other outputs to Excel, PDF printer, and also a great feature, what is called report collections, being a keyword I'll share with you today. And then finally, at least in the PowerPoint, here is slide 2 of 2, graphing. Yep, I'll show you some great little graphs, which really there was no ability in the old Microsoft era. Item number 8, drill down and drill order. Super awesome feature. Or item number 10, statistics, leveraging Prospero's data warehouse, including non-general ledger data. And usually, finally, I tease myself on that 12th item, price. We're a fraction of the cost of our competition. So I'd say about on average, we're about half the cost, not only in the license cost, but usually deployment, because usually our competition is usually about a 3 to 4 to 5 week, meaning 100 about hours to deploy, but Prospero a fraction, not only in license cost, but deployment, because usually in a couple of days, you're up and running inside Prospero, going back to those migration of your reports or forecasting budgeting data. All right, thanks. We have a large audience that are new and use the application, so there's the little overview. Now, for the last 45 plus minutes, we're going to be looking at an overview of Prospero. And how I like to do so is through the eyes of maybe 2 individuals within your organization. One might be a power user, like in the finance and accounting area, that predominantly we have as our attendees, or secondly, it might be an end user, like a manager within your organization. And I'm going to even take one step back and talk about how you might want to deploy Prospero. And thankfully, you have a couple of options, because a lot of times our competition says, nope, you only have one way. Well, first of all, I'm going to be showing you predominantly today, we have a web or cloud hosted version. So I'm really opening up an internet, meaning a browser window, and I'm going to be launching the Prospero program. So one option of 2 or 3 is we can have this be a hosted application that Prospero we do, and we leverage the Microsoft Azure framework, which means it's powerful, secure. They got thousands and thousands of servers and backups that we rely upon for the Microsoft Azure hosted environment. Or second option of 3, you might want to install it on your servers. So sometimes we have some of our government agencies, healthcare, that they want it installed on their servers and infrastructure. So it only takes about 1 hour to install the application. And really, there's only 2 pieces to the install. Primarily, there's really just a SQL database behind the scenes. And secondly, there's just a web little interface to the database that you have through the client application. And third and finally, you might have a third party that is hosting your application. So for an example, I see several of you are using Great Plains. So you might have a third party that's hosting your Great Plains application instead of your servers. So a lot of our customers, we install Prospero on their third party hosted provider. So really the product looks and feels the same. The price foundationally is the same across all those. So, and then the look and feel of Prospero, you're going to see in just a second through the remaining 40 so plus minutes, is a Microsoft Office friendly look and feel, which means the transition maybe from FX to Manager Folder is going to be super easy. Or then I'm going to now log in as my two users. I'm going to log in now as my end manager user who has limited access rights. But a little later, I'm going to show you behind the scenes. And speaking of, we are always transparent in our demonstrations. We would love to show you all the setup behind the scenes because we're so proud of its ease and use. But if you're looking and at competition, have them show you stuff behind the scenes. Even I might be able to show you 3 or 4 other products as well, because they rarely, the sales team of others will not show you the complexities, because I, a 30-year veteran consultant, even on some of these competition products, it's very a struggle that they'll only show you the tip of the iceberg. They won't show you all the complexities and pains for the setup, but we'll show you all the detail behind. Now in my illustration, what I'm going to do is, let's say I'm a manager. Let's say there's 20 of us managers on this phone call I see today. How about you're our CFO? And you've given me access to 2 different reports every single day, week, or month. So here to the left, I'm going to call this report number 1, my actual versus budget report. Or to the right, how about you giving us all managers access to report number 2, a nice rolling 12-month this year, last year trend report. Or secondly, after I spend the next 10 minutes on the reporting side, I'll spend a few minutes on the budgeting side. And I'm going to get to this input area here, but maybe some of your users don't have budget input. They might not see this budget slash forecast for the upcoming cycle you might be in. And let me go ahead and open up this one report, my actual versus budget report. And let me take a second to acquaint you with our demonstration database. We have multiple companies, secondly locations, and third department. And finally, we do have an account segment like our revenue, expense, and balance sheet. You don't see the account segment because that is defined in our line or row definition, like for this income statement report I'm going to pull up. Now, speaking of company, our demonstration entity has multiple company in it, but this one end user only has access to company number 1. But we have about 3 or 4 companies here. And we limit that what we call security assignments. So we always say this product is created by accountants for accountants use. Or in other words, little or no IT involvement needed, which we love hearing and saying. Secondly, and similarly for our location, we have about 15 different locations, but this one end user only has access to our Denver location. And later I'll log in with our CFO that has access to all companies and all departments, and I'll show you a little bit more robust consolidation and drill down, but this user has more limited viewing. And finally, looking at our department, I'm looking at this pick list because for my one Denver location, I do have access to all departments, but I have either a list view of my departments or very nice, we also have a graphical view. Now this tree I'm showing you called all, another great new feature is this tree called all is automatically created and maintained versus all the Microsoft era products you had to manually create and manually update those as new department accounts get added. And this is going to be one example of usually 2 or 3 trees I'm going to show you. First of all on department, but then secondly I'll show you a tree on location, and third maybe a tree on our account segment where I can roll up all my expenses or all revenues, which is also a great new feature, leveraging trees on our account segment. All right, so long story short, I'm basically opening up this report for my one Denver location, looking at all of my departments that I usually like looking at the big picture first and leveraging my drill down. And then speaking of drill down, I'm going to do 2 rows here. First of all, sales. I'm going to double click anywhere on that line to see the detail. And what it did here, here's my tab to the left where I began. We call that level 1, my financial level. Or here's the tab to the right. We call this level number 2, my account level detail, because here's my sales for department A and B. And even I could go down a third level, and this tab to the right, what we call our transaction level. So again, level 1 financial, level 2, I'm looking at the sales of the different departments, or the tab to the right, I'm looking at all the individual transactions. And additionally, you're going to see some columns here that might show you vendor or customer information that you and your managers will have at your fingertips, meaning you do not need to have general ledger access. You just need to have Prospero access, like to the secure report, or also I can send them this report to Excel without being a non-licensed user, but we can try and encourage a licensed user for auditing and security compliance. All right, we sort of blanked out some of that vendor or customer information. I'm just closing out the transaction detail. This is one example I'm going to show you. Now, let me also emphasize that when I drilled into the sales, into my detail, even transaction, it shows across all these columns, meaning actual, prior year, budget, and variance, because most of our competition, you only can drill into a single cell, which I despise because these products might cost 2 or 3 times as much, take me 2 or 3 times as long to learn and deploy, but they don't have this ease and nimble drill down. And also, I'm going to show you drill order because I'm looking at sales now. Let me look at the same report, but through the eyes of my CFO, who instead of only looking at one company in one location, they see multiple. So I'm going to look at the same report now through my CFO's eyes. I'm going to drill into sales. Now, my first click or drill down order is by company. So here, hierarchically, maybe here's my two companies, meaning US and Europe. I'm going to drill down. Now, my second click might be my different locations, or third might be my department. So here's my second layer of analysis, and I can see some variances, who's good or bad. And then really, I'm going to drill into the Denver. This is the level my manager saw. When they drilled into Denver, they saw the different departments, but my CFO obviously sees multiple company and multiple location. And I'm really just going to scroll out, meaning here is the multiple location, what I'm going to call level number 2 through the eyes of my CFO. I'm closing this out. This is level number 1, meaning by company for my CFO. And what's very cool about Prospero, and I don't think I know of any other competing product that can do this or as nimbly, that is, I'm not going to go to a second, third, or fourth report, which usually you have to do historically for the Microsoft products or our competition. What I'm doing now is I'm going to do a quick analysis and slice and dice my report data. And what I'm using is this button here called changing the drill order. Well, my default and norm is company first, location second, department third. But what I can easily do is drag and drop because maybe I want to see how my different departments across companies and locations are doing. Now, when I drill into the report, instead of departments being my third drill down layer or analysis, it's my first here. So here's my different departments. I can immediately see variances, and I can obviously further see detail, like here's marketing. When I drill in, here's my different companies, meaning the next layer down, or here, my next layer down locations. And I'm going to do that one more time, but here I'm going to switch it up, meaning change the drill order. I'm going to drag location to the top. Now here at the very bottom, maybe I don't want to go 4 or 5 clicks deep here. So what I'm going to do here, let me just do that one more time, is change the drill order. I'm dragging location to the top, but instead of department second, company third, natural last, I'm dragging this account detail, meaning this gray account detail. That means I'm going to stop and I'm going to see the lowest detail immediately after location. So location first, my detail finally, and then let's look at sales, or I can look at salaries, any line. So here's my sales, but this time by location. I can quickly see problem areas. I'm going to open up the report for my problem child, meaning 4100 Denver, in just a second. But now when I drill in, I immediately see all the detail, meaning I don't have to go to a second or third layer deep. So awesome. All that's done by this button here, change the drill order. And then I'm looking briefly at some questions or comments. I see a couple users that said, hey, yep, we use that feature all the time. So thanks for that, Laura Mark. And I'm quickly seeing if there's any questions in the queue, but I see one other question I've already fielded. So I think I'm all current. And really, that's just a plug for leveraging the question area within the GoToWebinar area. And if I don't get a chance to answer all questions today, let me pull up based on the introduction, because a few people came in after the top of the hour. And again, who's hosting today's session is Derek, and there's my contact information. derek.krebs@msxgroup.com. And then you can also email for any questions or any one-on-one demonstrations or free trials. So that was maybe a third little remark or question I got in the queue. So thank you, one and all. I'll bounce back to there, and usually the last little 5 minutes of our session is devoted to question and answer, so I'll continue to monitor those along the way. Let me bounce back to my Prospero application. We were looking at my CFO's viewpoint, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to interact with this report. And really on the toolbar, I'm going from the left to the right. So we just talked about drill down and drill order, but next is I'm going to look at this data graphically, even drill into the graph. I'm going to reopen the report, maybe looking at more granularly, maybe individual location departments. I drilled into sales, but I'm going to drill into expenses, which I'll crank this off my list right now. And we have what is called the full account detail. And lastly, we have the ability to annotate the report and export it out. Now, I was just commenting about this button I'm going to check off my list. I drilled into sales. I'm back logged in as my end user, meaning only US company, only Denver, single location. And let's look at salaries, meaning I'm going to call this line 2. Earlier I drilled into my revenue. Now I'm drilling into expenses. Now, instead of looking at a third line, meaning supplies, which usually I do, is my norm, there's the account level, and then there's my transaction level. But we have fewer transactions for this line. We saw about 20 lines or transactions for the other. And one of my useful buttons, this even came from one of our customers a few years back. They said, hey, MSX Group, we love Prospero, but we'd also like to see this feature. So most of our new features comes for our current customer base. So I'd recommend you to share your feedback and such. And one thing is, and I'm going to have two thoughts to conclude, this button here called Full Account Detail, once I click it, I'm going to see all my lines of detail on one page because maybe my auditor is in town for their once annual visit. So this might be all my detail because here is what I'm going to call line 1 sales, or here's line 2 cost of goods sold. Here's all my detail on one screen if you prefer. And I'm just scrolling down to see the additional detail on one page. And what I just did was this button here, the full account detail, meaning all lines of detail on one page. Now, another thing I commented on was our ability to share some feedback. And briefly here, under the home ribbon, we have a Prospero help, and that's really the F1 button because wherever you might be inside the application, I'll just demonstrate this briefly. We have an awesome online help because I was currently in what we call the publish report workspace area within the viewer, and it's going to describe all these topics, even related topics down below, and yada yada. But there is tons of great online help, meaning it pulled up a web page, translated differently, meaning we're adding new features all the time, we're updating the online help all the time. But that's a great way to see information about the product wherever you might be inside the tool. All right, let me return to my report. I just clicked on the help button. Otherwise, the F1 button is a shortcut for that. Secondly, what I wanted to do is show you this button here called feedback and support, because a few of the customers I see in today's phone call, if you want to see any new features in the product, this could serve two purposes. This button here called feedback and support. Well, these two buttons for issue and support request, this is what I'm going to call a hotline in our support. It really doesn't matter which of these two buttons you click. This is an easy way to contact our support. Or otherwise, we have email, or otherwise the phone. You can reach out to them. And I always like to applaud our support and development teams for great new features and functionalities, very few product errors and issues. If not, they fix those very, very fast versus a Microsoft error. It took months and years, but really super fast. And additionally, our response to our customers. And finally, within this feedback support, it might be a product suggestion, like the new feature of many I'm going to share today that you could provide us your wishes down the road. All right, little sidestep there. I'm back to my report, and I think I've talked about most of the little bullet points here. I'm going to conclude with maybe one or two others here. That is changing the report prompt. because usually I like to look at the big picture, meaning for my Denver location, I'm looking at all departments, but we saw my drill down. But I'm going to come up here and change the report prompt. And normally it will remember your report prompts, but since I logged in as my CFO, I have like 2 or 3 sessions. But here, finally, meaning change the report prompt, maybe I wanted a more granular look. And let me reiterate that this one is going to be restricted based on your security. So I'm just going to pull up randomly my marketing department 300, and I want to maybe focus my attention more granularly on it. And then here, the tab to the left, which we see in the background, that's the original report of all departments. As we see the heading, there's all my departments. Or then here is me more granularly. I'm looking at the service marketing department. And then I'll still have all the drill down to the account and transaction level. Like sales, there is all my transactions. All right. It wasn't that glamorous, I know, but this button here called Change Report Prompt. And speaking of report prompts, some of you might want the historical graphical look and feel. So a lot of times this report prompt means it's collapsed. And here is just me looking at maybe locations. Now, speaking of locations and trees regarding, let me introduce trees. Secondly, we first saw trees on department. Now we're seeing trees on location. And third, I'm going to show you trees on the account. But briefly, changing the report prompt, a lot of times we collapse these tree prompts. The historical products already had them expanded, and that's really what this window does here in the background. It has your location department sort of expanded without an extra pop-up window. Now, speaking of these trees, and another great new feature of Prospero that was not in the Microsoft era products that I'll mainly compare this to is you in the Microsoft era and products, you had to go to 3 or 4 reports that use 3 or 4 different trees. Within Prospero, I might have this one report. So I can come up here, if I have security, is always my little footnote. I can maybe go to what I'm going to call tree number 1. This tree 1 called all, it's automatically created and maintained. But I'm going to call this tree number 2. I'm going to call this tree number 3 because I might want to slice and dice my organization differently because within sales, this is what I'm going to call my divisional tree by function, meaning my sales functions or my services. And then notice you might have a San Francisco within sales and service here. And that's really how I might want to have my tree done differently because here is maybe San Francisco sales and service rolled up in a different tree by geography. Okay. Now, speaking of these trees, another great new feature is you can use ranges or wildcards. So here's my Midwest. Maybe I'm in an expansion phase. I'm adding new locations all the time. It was very, very painful in the Microsoft products to update your trees for those. But in Prospero, we have the best of both worlds, meaning I can open up Midwest in its entirety, but also I can look them up individually because Midwest are all those that begin with a 4. But usually I have a list of here all my 4 departments, but this end user, I probably should have logged in as my CFO to show that. Let me just do that here, meaning I'm reopening a report. My CFO, we're looking at the location. And then here are all the different 4 different departments here, meaning my list view, meaning 4100, 41200, etc. Or I could look at it graphically through my tree. Like there's my West or ranges and wildcards we always try to strive for if we can. All right, thank you for that little note. And maybe the last little sentence I want to make sure I was a little bit clear on was in my end user. Yeah, commonly I use this button here to change the report prompt, but over here to the right, I also can see my prompts in the sort of old Microsoft way because here might be my department A, B, and C. So if I wanted to toggle to 300, 400, etc., I could toggle in this sort of graphical way if you wanted this always shown here to the right instead of being collapsed. And finally, before I get to some of the budget fun, or maybe looking at some of the behind the scenes stuff, like these trees a little bit further, or line set, let me talk about 2 final things as my quote unquote interacting of this report. Well, how about I see about 20 of us on today's phone call. My CFO I see is also on this call, and he wants or she wants us to explain our variances of actual versus budget. So let me role play with his salaries. You see sort of a large variance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click anywhere on this line and annotate. And see the icon to the left? We also have here in the toolbar, and I'll say something like variance for this account, yada, 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 and then I'll stop there. And then I'll excuse my bad typing. Some days I think I'm dyslexic when I'm typing here, but there is my variance. Once I click OK, you're going to see a couple of great things here. One is an icon indicator. I can hover on top of it to see that memo or note. Or here to the right, instead of me hiding, I'm going to click this thumbtack to not auto hide the annotation. And you're going to see a nice time date stamp of who and when this annotation was added. I'm logged in as your generic manager one user, but here's Derek Krebs on this day and time added this memo or note. And here in the bottom right, I can add, modify, or delete that note. And maybe I'm going to click on the add button. How about let me role play this as Derek's boss logged in. And then here's our game plan for that. And then once I click OK, if I hover on top of it, I'm going to read the last memo or note. But here to the right, you might see notes from multiple individuals over time. But here is a nice centralized interactive area where you can put financial footnotes instead of me hunting down separate emails, Word documents. This is all going to be centrally self-contained within this report. And that again was annotations. Last but not least, two final things. I'm going to come up here and display this report as a graph. But before I do that, I usually have opened to save a couple of clicks. I'm going to call this my CFO dashboard because how about every morning, me, the CFO, I like to open up this report collection, meaning multiple reports, maybe 4 of them. Meaning here to the left, I'll call the report number 1 in a tabular form. Or how about report number 2 graphically, like a trend over the last quarter? Or here's report number 3, looking at my companies or locations side by side. Or report number 4, maybe a margin analysis, meaning a pie graph. And really simply, this is a report collection where I can automatically run multiple reports at once. And this is an example of one of report collection. And I'm going to show you 2 other examples in just a minute. Speaking of, let's now take that one report, meaning as my manager, I'm going to look at this data graphically, followed by exporting it out. But I'm going to come up and click on this graph. And I forgot what graph type we chose here. All right, looks like a pie graph. I'm going to drill into that pie node, and really I drilled into the graph here. I see here to the right my margin analysis between my different departments or products like sales versus marketing, and I could drill down even further because here is what I call level number 1 of my graph. I drilled into level number 2 of my graph, and I can quickly see a margin analysis between sales in blue or marketing in red. Locations, products, you name it, based on your general ledger. Well, what's cooler than even drilling down from graph 1, or here's graph 2 to the right I drilled into, I can at any stage of the way, when I drilled in, I can switch to the report view. So here's this button. When I'm in a graph view, I can switch to the report view. And basically, this is my expenses I drilled into, broken out by my layer or level that I was in, meaning the different departments. Or it could have been companies or locations based on your security access and level you were in. And then I'm going to take this more granular, meaning analysis I drilled into, either graphically or tabularly. I'm going to export this out to Excel. It just asks me for a file name and path. I'll just keep the default. And basically, you're going to see this is what I'm going to call one report, an income statement, where I looked at just expenses, where I drilled in by department. Great. There is me. I could then analyze or further ad hoc analysis or share this data with others, maybe non-licensed users. And this is going to be an example of 1 of 3 now I'm going to continue with, meaning here's one report I drilled into, but let me now, and I saved a couple clicks, I now am going to look at that same report collection we saw earlier. Here was example 1, meaning in the workspace viewer electronically, which we're always going to recommend or encourage for security compliance. But otherwise, here's that same type of report collection we're seeing now in Excel. So here in the lower left, I'll call this report 1 income statement, or here's report or worksheet number 2 balance sheet. Here's report or worksheet number 3 my cash flow. Super easy to produce that. And last but not least, I think I had open here, in a PDF file, meaning save a tree in a printer, but here's electronic PDF. I'm just paging down. There's report 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. In your historical life, that was very painful, or many of our competition, they're going to charge you an extra arm and a leg for that extra add-in, but that's included with Prospero. And I like just really just show you, it only literally takes me 1 minute to show you behind the scenes, meaning I'm logged in as my power user inside finance and accounting. I'm in this area called report collections. And here is one of those that you saw today, meaning 4 different reports. I can click on the add button, remove. I'm just going to add a 5th report randomly. So I just added a 5th report here. I just run it for a certain date. How about let me run this for 2025 May. And then last but not least, once I've defined the reports in my collection, on the output tab, we saw example 1 to the workspace, or viewer I call it, example number 2 to Excel, or example number 3 to PDF. Or I could also put this in the publish report area, which is how my end users consume reports, which I'm going to bounce back to in just a second to my end user. And lastly, without shortchanging this, maybe the trainer had on me, one last little click, like if I went to Excel, you have the option yes or no to go to one single file, which is yes, more common, or I can turn that off. So if I have 5 reports to go to 5 separate files, but usually I turn that on, and that's the Excel output we saw here. Report 1, report 2, report 3, or back in the viewer, multiple reports. All right, I've concluded with my end user look and feel. What I want to do is take a moment to talk about the budgeting side, and if time permitting, I'm going to show you a couple of nice other things behind the scenes. Now, I'm logged in back as my end user. How about one of you on the phone call, being our CFO, you want us now to update our budget. It might be that time of the year, or now that we have awesome Prospero budgeting and forecasting abilities, there's no excuse. Maybe I'm going to do this quarterly or monthly reforecast out. So really, I'm going to update this budget real time, meaning I'm not going to bounce to Excel. I'm not going to import and export data to and from different applications, which is probably your world today. And I'm going to take one step back, meaning in my quick launch, me, the end user, I was looking at my last month actual versus budget. But if I have access rights to, you want me to be a budget contributor, and I'm going to now open up my budget. And really long story short, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up 3 different departments. Now these first 2 departments, or I can open up 100 of these, they share the same row definition or line set. Again, the power and ease of a non-Excel product here. I'm glad we're not an Excel add-in. There's so many things I do not favor as a veteran 30-plus year consultant with these products. And there's Department 1, expenses only. I'm going to open up Department 2, 3, 4, maybe the same look and feel, meaning the same row format, but to save a little time, let's say 50 of my departments use the same template, but I'm now opening up a 51st department that might behave a little differently, meaning this is my revenue and cost of goods sold focus. Maybe I don't even have access to this area based on that security assignment. But here now is, as I'm going over the budget screen, my remark is really emphasize the power of the flexible Prospero data warehouse. Primarily, we're going to report on general ledger data like companies, location, departments, and accounts you have, but 3 examples in the next 1 minute I'm going to share with you is data that's not in our general ledger. Example 1 are products like 10 motors, product 20 compressors. These are not my general ledger, but I can still budget and record actuals to those. Now these columns from left to the right, those are budget, and then we have some actuals here to the right. Now this example, I don't have actuals, but at least in a future year, I have actuals for these non-general ledger data. That was example 1 of stuff in our data warehouse we're including that's not in the GL. Example 2 are these statistics like units sold, revenue price, or cost price. They're not in our general ledger, but we can include that. And third example, we're going to talk about employee, like for wages that I'm budgeting for. That's not in our general ledger, like an employee dimension in most people's, but we can budget to that, which I'll show you in just a second. Now, briefly, I'm just going to edit this data. I'm just changing my units, and really you can use any color coding you wish. I like to use colors in white that are editable, but I like using gray that are locked from input, because I just changed that from 13,000 to 14,000. I'm going to come up here and save. It looks and feels like Microsoft Office and Excel, meaning ease of use. But again, it's a easy cloud web-based system where it can be installed on your servers, but it then has the power of the database and the trees behind the scenes. Now, one thing is I'm going to show you about 5 or 6 cool, great to haves in your budget. One of those is audit trail history. And what I did was, here is on today's date and time. I'm logged in as manager 1, but here's Derek on this day and time, change it from 13,000 to 14,000. And really what I'm looking at is my account for, let's say, revenue. I could look at history across all accounts. So now the only thing different is, instead of me looking at a single account, I can put my cursor not on a specific account. So now when I'm looking at history, I'm seeing multiple accounts. And then I'm just going to come up here, and here's my unit sold. I'm expanding. Here's one account for units sold. Yeah, I'm expanding. Here's where Derek changed the units, but I can see the history across multiple different accounts. And last but not least, here's the one department I'm in. Here's my different accounts. I even can look at history across all my location company departments. That would just be really a third screen if you wanted to see more of a macro, like who changed this $1 million across many different departments. So as I take one step back, I showed you 2 examples of 3 for great audit trail history. Now, additionally, I'm going to go back to one of my main departments that I usually pick on, and I'm going to collapse this navigation pane to the left. And let's look at, after that revenue and cost of sales detail, I'm going to look at maybe purpose-built tab for HR and capital. So here's one of the largest costs of most organizations, including ours: salaries, wages, and bonuses. Here's statistics that are not in our general ledger, not only budgets, but here are the right actuals. Then also we have related benefits. And the next 2 minutes, these are gray and locked from input. This HR tab, I might not have access at all to it. And if I do, it might be read only, or maybe you allow me to edit it. But I do have access to it, and maybe you give me access to edit this, meaning any new hires or fires I want to budget for. But really, I'm thinking 3 things, working with about 1,000 plus customers on their budget reporting. One might be you want to budget wages, maybe by the person, like Bob or Sally. Maybe secondly, by position, because you might have a lot of turnover, because maybe I need this many technicians. I need 15 technicians averaging at $25 per rate. Or third, it might be more statistically based. And then here I'm going to look at a couple of columns, because here I'm really just going to compare and contrast 2 users, because here's a user that starts later in the year, period 6. They either could be hourly or salary, where you see the different dollar amounts here. And then speaking of allocation, I can show everybody hourly based, like here in the toolbar. I want to show everybody full-time equivalency based, or I'm showing people mixed. Now, hand in hand with that little toggle switch, I'm even going to take one step back, because for this one department, and even I can go back to a report looking at all departments rolled up. Yeah, I have these same type of statistics here rolled up as well, both budgeted into the right actuals as you wish. And then let me continue. I even can break this out by month. So instead of 2 columns of when they start and end, I could break it out by month or period. Most companies only have 12 months or periods, but some of our customers have weekly or daily periods in their general ledger. So we can match or meet your needs. And then additionally, here might be pay raises, where how about I'm going to pick on this one user. They start making 25,000. They're going to 10% raise in period 3. I even could add 2 more columns for a second or third pay raise ability. And then finally, we also have nice to haves, meaning not required. Bonus by either dollar or percent, maybe where you want to budget out individual periods, but the 10%, if the period's left blank, it's going to accrue it across all the months they work. So this will be 10% across periods 6 through 12 only, if this period is blanked. And last but not least, if you need to get granular, optional again, we might have overtimes, yes or no, for individuals. We might have commissions. Let's say some of our sales team and staff might want this commission area populated, or I can obviously come up here and ignore that. because this commission field or columns, I as administrator and giving them access to see those all, but I'm really just saying toggling that on and off. And we can even have security where I can say, nope, they don't see these fields at all. Or if they do see it, it's edit only. So we have a lot of easy controls as a finance person. And last but not least, I'll even use MSX Group and me as an example. We have employees in about 10 different states. Derek, I live in California. So whenever I import maybe the 100 plus MSX Group staff here, I might have a simple import file. I do once a year, a quarter, or a month. That only might take me 5 minutes to load our 100 employees. Along with their name, like Bob and Sally, I might need a column for their department, like department A or B. And then optionally, I might have column for what state they're in, which might dictate the state tax rate. Or for health insurance, you might want to budget one flat rate for everybody where you don't need this field, if so. But in this example, we might have two or more rates like single family, high deductible, low deductible. So really, you define these column headings and you define these rates. And I'm just going to show you one table behind the scenes where we define those, just to show you the power and ease, because our competition that have Excel add-ins, usually they have thousands of formulas, but we have no formulas. I'm really logged in to my administrator screen on this HR tab. This really top half really tells the system what expense account I'm hitting. A lot of times people only have one line in one expense account, but we have two different ones, and I can zoom in to see the two different wage accounts. There is exempt salaries and non-exempt, meaning two different expense accounts we hit. And then really why our database has more in case we get asked questions on one-on-one demonstrations. Hint, hint. I'll be glad to do a one-on-one demo later with you. But here's our hourly and salary, and sometimes people might be revenue or bonus eligible and others not. That's why I might have more than one. Now, finally, here at the very bottom, here is my FICA, meaning benefits could be a percent of salary with a limit, like FICA normally is, or without a limit, 1.45. And how about next year, 132,000? Now, this is one simple table. In other words, there's no formulas behind the scenes, but our competition usually has hundreds of thousands of formulas they'll never show you. So make sure they do show you the complexities of theirs. And I was just talking about benefits being a percent of salary, or secondly, there might even be a third option, but commonly, and secondly, it might be a fixed rate, because here is health. I'm just going to call this choice A by single or family. And then here is me being able to add a new choice. I'm not going to do it, but here I might add an extra line here. This might be my HMO plan or PPO plan, and behind the scenes, it might be a different dollar per month here. Like one of our single is at $900 a month, or $1,200 or $500, but I'm just adding a new choice here in literally seconds. And then going full circle here, as I just added another choice or two for health, I'm going to now go full circle. My end user doesn't even have to think or worry about this. We import this all in ahead of time. But then here, as I go back to the main tab, not only my wages get rolled up, we have the statistics for headcount, hours, FTE. Here's our payroll tax. And notice here it starts high, like 5.2, it tapers off, but then it increases again, because here's where we add our new person in the month of June. Once again, there's no formulas in the system. It's just one simple table that only the administrators see. I just added or edited in seconds. All right, and let me finish up with maybe 1 or 2 minutes of the budget screen. We have what is called line item detail. See this little plus icon? There's tuition. Or here is advertising. Let's say I'm in the advertising department currently. Here's the one general ledger account, 7350. Well, why did Derek budget a $500,000? And I can come up here and insert a line item. So here might be my June 2025 ad campaign. And then over here to the right, how about for June and July? I'm just going to budget 5,000 this month, but then 3,000 this month. And I'm going to come up here on the toolbar. I'm going to collapse all the line item detail. I'm going to expand all that we're just showing in a random green color, whatever you prefer. But now here's Derek's advertising budget. I'll have more answers than questions, like why did Derek budget a $500,000 here in my advertising? I'm just adding this line item on the fly, which is one great option. But let me briefly show you in my revenue cost of goods sold, maybe I want a more fixed structure. Like here's units sold times price. So a lot of times you might want a fixed structure, but you might have the best of both worlds based on what departments or accounts and how you want those budgeted. So test me and us on our free trial version. There's really not been a budget model I've not been able to reduce this product for its power and ease. And let me conclude looking at our question and answer area. And as I do so, I have to bounce to another screen, but let me at least pull up a nice little thank you. I'm going to still stick on the line for the next 5 minutes, but there's maybe my thank you and offer for any questions. Again, my email is derek.krebs@msxgroup.com. If you want to see a little one-on-one, ping me. Otherwise, I'll route you through any account manager that we have maybe on our side. And then also we'll be sharing a recording, not only the live one I did today, but also we have 2 or 3 many more recorded discussions of this application. All right. I do not think I see any questions in the chat area that I've not yet addressed. All right. And then how about with time permitting, let me just show you 1 or 2 final things. That is one of the pain points in your world today was where you had new accounts you added to the general ledger. And then really the punchline is using a summary account and then expanding it, and an account tree is going to be the next 1 or 2 minutes I'm going to share with you. Now here's a common report. I'll focus on expenses. Above this row, I'm showing all the expense accounts. And then a nice feature here, I'm going to click this button here to show the hidden columns, because here's my different account numbers or not. And then here's the summary account. We can name these summary accounts anything we wish, like COGS, GRPF, EXPN. We can give them any name. And since I'm a power user, I'm going to go to the line set. Now, I can show these side by side, meaning tab 1 or tab 2 I have open. I'm going to just show these vertically, because here to the left is my report and that summary account. Now here's the old bad way, meaning for my revenues, to show them all individually. And maybe next month I have to come up here and insert a new account. That's the old bad way. The new good way is on our expense line. Even though we're showing all expenses, we only have one line here. And let me come up here and make that bigger again. Notice the expansion. We're saying above this row, meaning above this summary account. What 0 means, it means show me every individual account. And let's take a look at that summary account. First of all, I'm going to look at a read-only view of it. Otherwise, finally, in the last 30 seconds or minute, I'm going to show you how easy it is to create or define that. Now, most organizations only need one account tree, but for demonstration purposes, we might have a cash tree where for our cash flow report and budgeting, we might have non-cash items like depreciation bonuses, stock equity, broken out separately. But let's look at our net income tree, because here's expenses, and it might be a nice little range. Or example 2 on gross profit, I'm going to expand it because gross profit might be my revenue, might be a range, or it might be cost of goods sold. And cost of goods sold here is one level down, meaning here is one level down. So in my expansion, I could have typed in 1. If this were cost of goods sold, it might show me these 3 separate lines, what I'm going to call labor, material, and overhead. All right, but there's a summary account. And last but not least, let me finish with this expense summary account. It's a range, or in other words, if I add new general ledger accounts to my GL, I do not have to update this roll-up tree, nor I do not have to update this line set that's not only used for reports, but oftentimes used for my budget screen. And the final sentence I'm going to do is show you under trees, under the natural account, let's look at that net income. And I'm just going to come up here and right click and expand or collapse the entire tree. I'll expand it. There's my range. And last but not least, I'm going to right click on this expense summary. I want to see where I'm using that throughout this system. And then here you're going to have a nice little inventory. And you're going to see here, looking at the type column, this one summary account is used for all these different reports and budget templates here, maybe in columns or trees here. And if I change my mind, hopefully I don't with a range or wildcard, but if I change my mind, I do so in this one single tree. I don't have to worry about downstream. Because again, we're an awesome row, column, or tree product, meaning we're not an Excel add-in. And on the home ribbon, Usually I like to introduce this, but I forgot at the very beginning of the phone call. I'm really looking at a list of all my rows, columns, and trees. So here's everything I have in the system. Like here's my report list. Here's all the line sets, etc. And then here are all my reports that are sharing the same line set called income statement that I did. Versus again, we're not an Excel add-in. I can reuse these building blocks over and over, but our competition you can't, which I despise and still work with, but I love working with Prospero customer base, which is the majority of our business this day. So, all right. Um, there's probably more, but we're at the top of the hour. So I'll say a big thank you again. Everybody that might be live with us today or later through recording, reach out at any time. Again, yours truly, Derek Krebs here. So otherwise, thank you and have a great day. Goodbye.